Jeff, I am resurrecting one of the 5 billion series that we have here on Kicking the Seat. This one is called Bond and Determined,
Oh,
where
very
we
good.
discuss the James Bond films. Now, we've done a few episodes with various guests over the years, kind of jumping around the Bondiverse, as it were. But right now,
Mhm.
we're going back to the original incarnation, or is it? We'll get to that later on. But Sean Connery as James Bond 007, not the first film, Dr. No, but we're talking about the fourth film in the series, Thunderball. Why are we talking about it? Well, A, I'd never seen Thunderball up until preparing for the show, and B, Warner Brothers has just come out with a 6-disc 4K collection of the Connery Bond films. So I'd seen a couple of them on there, but there are a number of blind spots, and Thunderball was one of them. So I asked you, my good friend Jeff, like, which one should we start with? I asked about Dr. No, starting with the first one, and you're like, we could,
Yeah.
but you were more excited about Thunderball, and now I understand why. So Jeff of the establishingshot.org and Pipeline Artists, how are you today?
I'm good, thanks. Really excited to be here with you today. I'm a big Bondophile and can talk pretty well about almost all the Bond movies without having to rewatch them another time because I've seen most of them numerous times. Though I did watch this one this last weekend to sort of shore up on it because I probably have not revisited Thunderball in at least 20 years.
And have you, I just want to set the table here. Have you revisited other Bond films more frequently and more recently than this one?
Yes.
Okay, so is that to say that Thunderball is good in your estimation, but not one that you go back to? Or is it like just so memorable that you watched it and you don't need to see it for 2 decades because it's still running in your head?
A little bit of both, but mostly the first part of that equation, because I think it is notable for a number of reasons, which we'll get into. But I think in the big scheme of all the Bond films in the franchise, I think it's a good Bond film without being a great Bond film.
Okay. I will say I agree with you, but I think the last 20 minutes of this movie are better than the entire 3 hours of Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning.
Well, it's interesting you say that because this, for the longest of time, was the only James Bond movie that won an Academy Award. And it won its Academy Award for visual effects. And I think for the visual effects, what it was considered in those days was all kinds of things, including a lot of the underwater sort of stunt photography and different sort of second unit things they did, which is spectacular in this movie. It still looks great. To your very point, Ian, you look at this and go like, that's Connery underwater. That's Adolfo Celli underwater. They are really doing some major stunt work under here. I don't know how they shot it and edited. I mean, you can imagine, but it must have taken them weeks to put all that together and get it right. And, you know, choreography isn't like, oh, I missed that by a millisecond. It's like, no, you got to come back up, take direction, go back down to the water, get it. Can't. It's ridiculous. Plus, there's other funny set pieces in it, and you know, even the sped up film and the air pack and stuff like that. I'm sure was all under that banner. But it was a very impressive film to the Academy, and it was a very impressive film to the world forever and a day. And I think maybe to this day, it is still the biggest money making Bond film in North America.
Wow. And to think this is, fourth in this series. I mean, not a lot of people talk about, as far as I know, Dr. No, except
Right.
for it was the first one.
Right.
Goldfinger, From Russia with Love, those get a lot of acclaim and
Yes.
popularity. But Thunderball to be, the highest grossing or one of the tops in the franchise, that's kind of surprising to me. What do you attribute that to?
Well, I think by this point, Bond was hitting its stride. In fact, when you watch the film, and I was kind of laughing out loud at a number of the things because, like, okay, this is where they cemented that bit. I mean, first of all, it's the Maurice Binder did the credits for Dr. No, though they weren't really James Bond credits yet. But this one, they're James Bond credits. Goldfinger got a little bit close to what we have now come to expect, except it was really just clips from the show filmed on a woman's body parts. But this one is definitely the Maurice Binder kind of, cliches of silhouetted women and slow motion and moving type and colorful things and zooms in and zooms out, zoom outs and stuff like that. I also think that it was, the sort of zenith, if you will, maybe of Ken Adams' production design. Now, grant you, he doesn't have the big sets like he did later on with things like The Spy Who Loved Me, or even the end battle in the volcano from You Only Live Twice. But the director of this film was very smart. The way he shot everything, Terrence Young, who went on to do a number of them, because he showed every set that Ken Adams did in its width. I mean, it's very impressive, from the hotel rooms to some of the meeting rooms, et cetera, as well as, the SPECTRE layer, which is so almost laughable when you see it now, because you're like, oh, that's what Mike Myers was parodying in Austin Powers, right down to the fiery death chair, and then it comes back up smoldering. Like, are they going to reupholster that? I don't know. I hope so, because I'd hate to be the person who got that seat. Shall we play musical chairs to see if it's all fair that, and a lot of the action and the sort of girl situation, one of the Bond women, or Bond girl, or whatever you want to call them, is killed because, she's the agent, she's kind of the good person. And then there's the evil one who's also, bad in this. And then of course the final girl, the one who's kind of the love interest who survives. And, even the ludicrous ending where they're hoisted out of the raft and some of that, but also, it's at this time period, I think it was state of the art action. There wasn't a lot of movies that had this kind of action in them. I mean, if you had Westerns, there were shootouts, but it was typical stuff, gun slinging, hiding behind this while you're shooting it out, maybe escaping on a horse or something like that. But this one, underwater, all that fighting and the harpoons and the escapes and the different vehicles underneath there, it was kind of incredible. This is 1965 and it looked great, but it's kind of fun to see it all sort of convalesce here. Like, okay, Thunderball is where it all kind of came together and became James Bond tropes and themes and the look and everything else, more so than the other things that were leading up to it and doing little bits and pieces of it. But like Maurice Binder didn't do the credits for Russia with Love and Goldfinger. He did it for Dr. No and then returned for this. Ken Adams did Goldfinger and then proceeded to do more of them. And then these guys were kind of being brought back repeatedly. But this is the first one where I think they all kind of came together and established a lot of the shtick, which would be Bond till today, really. I mean, the same kinds of ideas and themes.
One of the things that I loved, and it's you're talking about the kind of the Bond staples, is
right.
At one point we meet up with Q, who shows up to
right.
deliver the gadgets. Now,
right.
I have not seen all the Bond films. I think, as we've established, I'm still making my way through them.
Right.
But does Bond always use all of the gadgets that Q presents to him? Because it feels like it would be great to see if he presents him with these 7 gadgets and he only ends up using one, because you're like, okay, so now I know he's going to end up in this situation, this situation, this situation.
Right. I think almost every time Q presents a knickknack to him, he will use it in the movie. That's my recollection. I don't swear to that, but I'm pretty sure that they probably wouldn't have wasted the time until then. By the way, one other thing that I'll just throw out and I sent it to you today, which was kind of a run there for about 4 or 5 films, was Robert McInnes, who did a lot of illustrations for Playboy and sort of hard-boiled Mickey Spillane and detective noir kind of fiction, paperbacks that you'd find in drugstores and bookstores on the cheaper section. A lot of great covers of scantily clad women, and then he did movie posters as well. He started doing the James Bond movie posters with Thunderball, and he proceeded to go on and doing a number of them. And even some are like the one I sent you today, that which is a little too risque. It's Bond laying out naked in the massage table. It's like, is he naked there? We can't have that. But it was, I actually saw that on display at an art gallery.
Oh,
the original
really?
painting. Yeah. And it was pretty large. I mean, it was probably, I don't know, 24 by 36 long. And I didn't realize he worked that big, but he did, and he exaggerated the length of people's bodies too. I mean, if Sean Connery stood up from that pose in the painting I sent you, he would have been 8 feet tall. But it all made him larger than life characters and sexier and more interesting movie posters in their way.
Man, because I only looked at the thumbnail pretty much, or the small version on my phone of what you had sent me. I can
Mhm.
only imagine seeing that because it's impressive,
Yeah.
especially with the colors. It really
Oh,
freaking
yeah.
pops, and it makes me lament the sad state of movie posters. But that's a whole other discussion.
We should do a discussion on that some point because we could say like, here are 5 great movie posters everybody should need and try to copy today, rather than all these Photoshop monstrosities.
Oh, so bad. But let's talk about Thunderball. What
Sure.
is Thunderball? What's it about? Jeff, please synopsize the film for
Well,
us.
the basics of this plot have to do with the same plot, and it's kind of a credit to this movie that was actually the plot of the book Thunderball. They both have the same exact plot, and they follow it very closely. This is one of the few Bond films that followed it almost to the letter, not quite to the letter, obviously, but very, very close. Whereas more and more of the Bond films went on, they tend to use the titles of Ian Fleming's books without necessarily the title, the plots. But this one,
They're like the Marvel movies, pretty much.
yeah, yeah, in many respects. Yeah, it's like we like that title. The story, yeah, let's do something about space. We'll call it Moonraker. Um, but in this one, the number 2 operative of Spectre is Emilio Largo, and he devises this plan to basically hold NATO ransom by hijacking 2 atomic bombs that are coming from an RAF bomber during a training exercise. And in doing so, they're going to get all this kind of money to, I think it's 100 million pounds, 100 million pounds to use for all their, destruction, terror, and shenanigans that this bad company is planning to do throughout the world. And it is very complicated because there's fake identities and different characters playing this, that, and the other thing. There's also an agent that's killed, and James Bond is partially doing it as a revenge mission, but he's also doing it to try to figure out this mystery and what's going on here and what the ultimate goal is, as well as the fact that they get intel that these bombs have been stolen, but they don't know quite where they are. So there's all that to it as well. And it ultimately ends up taking him to Nassau in the Bahamas, where it's all shot on location, which was also pretty novel for that time. I mean, they did stuff on location in many films in those days, but not like here. I mean, they actually have a full parade and nightlife and all that with the locals and all these people, bands that are, from that area playing and doing action set pieces in there and chase sequences. It's kind of extraordinary, but it's actually them down in the waters of the Bahamas and on the locations and in the various motels and restaurants and eateries and stuff like that around there, as well as going underwater for, like I said, a lot of the stunt work and yachts and other things like that. But that's the essence of it. And so it kind of works as a mystery. It kind of works as a, figuring out who the bad guys are and what they're doing, as well as, I dare say a revenge sort of story where Bond is trying to, make good for something that has been done against his fellow agent and also Felix Leiter is in there from the CIA, not to mention the, just sort of thwarting Spectre, which was now being sort of defined in all these movies as the sort of counter to MI6 and the CIA. The bad version of that is they're trying to do all these sort of terrible, terrible things under the guise of class and savoir-faire, but still terrorism.
Right. I mean, in the Spectre boardroom, which happens early on in the film, which
Right.
the exploding chair and everything, they're going over basically the finances of all the
Yes.
global illegal
Yes.
operations, including one was very interesting: China trying to sell illegal drugs inside the United States to
Yes.
poison the population.
Isn't that
Um,
funny?
y-
I know
n-
some of it sort of rings a little true, even though it's fiction. But then again, Ian Fleming came from that world, so I think he was always borrowing stuff that he knew was going on, or maybe embellished some. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely the communists, and some of those folks were definitely still on the big enemies list, so they show up here.
right,
As
and
does embezzling. The one guy was embezzling from Spectre. I think he was number 11, right? Not number 9. Where Largo is number 2, which is funny that he's underwater doing all the dirty work when he's actually one of the big head honchos. But he's also such a Bond villain, too. Like, he looks good in the dinner jacket. He's a man of 50, kind of a silver fox, but he's also got the eye patch, so he looks sinister. And those kind of things became tropes, too, of, well, we've got to give the Bond villain some sort of handicap or some sort of destruction that makes his face, burned, or Blofeld when he shows himself as Donald Pleasance and he's got this slash across his eye, and that's what Mike Myers also parodied when he did Dr. Evil. but yeah, Largo was definitely kind of a sort of became almost the sort of prototype of a Bond villain, where he's not only elegant and sophisticated, but also crazy and also a little bit sort of marred.
Well, and there was also, I want to jump ahead to, and
Sure.
this is a spoiler for a, 70-year-old, 60-year-old, I can't do my math, a 60-year-old movie at this point. Typically, from what I understand about these movies, is the bad guy is dispatched by James Bond in the big climactic fight.
Right.
Not so in this case.
Right.
Domino gets, and that's the, Bond's kind of erstwhile girlfriend in this version.
Right.
She gets the revenge for, Spectre essentially murdering, specifically Largo murdering her brother.
Right.
And he was a pilot who the identity was swapped for a Spectre agent who learned how to talk like him, had plastic surgery and everything, so that he could take over this RAF plane that had the bombs on it, steal it for Spectre. And it was so beautiful because at the last moment, as he's getting ready to leave for his mission, he tries to, I guess, kind of blackmail the Spectre
get a
agent,
bigger
saying,
deal.
yeah, hey, I want $50,000 more. And they're like, you can't do that to us. And he's like, well, you need me. And they're like, oh, I guess you're right. And then at the very end, when he's at the bottom of the ocean trying to get out, Largo swims down there and basically cuts his air hose, and he drowns. It's savage stuff. There's a lot of fun nastiness to this movie that I really appreciated. People being fed to sharks, which again, did all of Dr. Evil's shtick come from this movie? I'm starting to feel like it did.
Quite a bit of it, yeah. In fact, it's surprising too how many Bond films subsequently borrowed a lot of these motifs. I mean, there's somebody fed to the sharks in a couple movies, in For Your Eyes Only, in License to Kill. There's a lot of the same kind of underwater sequences in that movie, as well as For Your Eyes Only and the Never Say Never Again, which was a remake basically of Thunderball, done outside of the sort of the family of Broccoli and Saltzman for or whatever, back when anyway, it was the one that legally they could sort of do without being part of this owned Fleming franchise. But other ones did it too. I mean, there was the underwater car, and in The Spy Who Loved Me, and some of the same kind of shtick at the end with him being I mean, remember they're looking in on the little submarine that he and Agent XXX are in, and making quips about whatever they're doing in there. So yeah, the Bond made hay out of a lot of the tropes already in this movie let alone Mike Myers.
Well, the opening, kind of the cold open that we get a lot of these Bond movies, is a funeral, and
Yes,
Bond ends up in a fight with the widow, who turns out to be a Spectre agent,
right.
and he kills the Spectre agent and actually throws some of the funeral flowers on the body as the other agents are coming in to pursue him. But he gets kind of banged up and ends up taking a bit of a sabbatical in this. It's like a chalet, like a therapeutic resort, where he gets into even more trouble, including on a massage table that was.
Oh man,
you're talking about Bond having fun at its kind of own expense. He's strapped down to this massage table, and it's an automated thing that's supposed to stretch out his back. But an agent comes in and sets the thing basically to full tilt boogie. So Bond ends up like going like this on this massage table, and it looks like he's having like furious sex with it. I'm
yes,
like, if this were
looking. Yeah,
right, but I could just totally see this would be the way that James Bond would go out.
I know. By this time, they were already winking a little bit at the franchise itself and having some fun with it, like with the flowers he tosses on the dead body. And there's a couple of the lines here, though they aren't as blatant as they got. And by the time, they got into the 70s and 80s, everybody was making the same quips, whether it was Bruce Willis in his movies, certainly Schwarzenegger in his. They became sort of the punctuation that Connery did so well. I mean, I still think the best one is when he is running out of bullets and the fight in Goldfinger, and finally he just tosses the fan into the bath where the bad guy is ended up landing, unfortunately, and then electrocutes him, and as Connery walks away, goes, shocking. It's just one word. It's very clever. But then that was such a success, such a big laugh line in Goldfinger. They started like, we need more of those. So we'll have some sort of bit. But even the fact that they had the widow was a man, in disguise is something that we've seen in all kinds of, they make fun of that in The Naked Gun at present, with Liam Neeson being the little girl who stands up and, what do you want, little girl? Your ass. It's just, it's like, oh my God, here's Bond where the widow is a bad guy, and they tossed it around pretty well. I'm also impressed with the stunt work in this film. There's a lot of people being thrown around and in the bookcases and over furniture, and it's not Connery doing a lot of it. Obviously, he's the star, though he's underwater plenty. But kudos to the stunt work and the stunt people during this, because it doesn't look fake. It looks like they're really thrashing and crashing about.
Yeah, and it's something that I really miss in the modern era of Bond. I think the gold standard for the modern Bond is Casino Royale, and then they just happen to have like 3 movies after it that were consistently diminishing returns.
Yes.
Casino Royale still had action, but it still had a lot of globetrotting investigation and adventure, and not so much the, what does it all mean? And I'm having this existential crisis and I'm sad over my girlfriend and all this other stuff. What I loved about Thunderball in particular is Connery's Bond is so cool and so kind of casual that you just feel like he was born to be this guy. I kept wondering, what was his training like? Did someone teach him to be this casual, or did MI6 pluck him out of obscurity? Because he's like, this guy doesn't care about anything. He can waltz into a place and just flirt with the coat check girl while he's getting secret information on the world's biggest terrorist organization. When he goes to the bunco game where he sits down with Largo. And I think it was Fiona is his kind of mole.
Yep.
He's just like tossing around like there's a specter looming over your game, and he keeps like bringing up the word specter and just like getting under Largo's skin, like, who is this guy?
Like,
what are you
I know
doing?
who you are, but I'm not going to quite say it in the obvious way. Yeah, exactly.
But it's so much fun to watch him. You realize he's really dangerous and really smart, but you also just really want to hang out with him.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I think in the first Bond movies, you can see he's still a little bit tense and nervous. There's scenes where like the tarantula comes into the bedroom and he's very shook by that, or, he's tossed about by Pussy Galore in Goldfinger and, kind of acting like the shocked schoolboy that this woman can kick his ass. So, he's still a little bit of the spy in training, I think, and maybe not quite the cool, confident Connery in the role as he becomes in this one. I agree with you. In fact, that was one of my major takeaways from watching this now after so many years. This is where I think Sean Connery kind of had all of Bond down. Now, not saying that he wasn't a great Bond in those other movies where he's still vulnerable, but here he's been at it for a while. He looks good. He moves well. He's a smart spy. He's doing detective work as well as the fighting stuff, and seems very capable. Like, even when he's underwater, you sit there and go like, okay, he's at water training. Like, Bond is that good, as opposed to, well, Bond can fly anything and do anything. By the time Pierce Brosnan is handling any kind of plane, it's like, well, of course Bond's going to be able to do that. He's done everything. But here, it was still a little bit new, but he played it really well. And I think, for my money too, I'm not sure Connery's ever looked better in a film. Even the hairpiece was really good in this one. It looked good. It looked good underwater. Maybe that was one of the reasons they won the Oscar for special visual effects too, because that hair looked damn right under. It's like, somebody's going to talk to him about this, right? Sean, we've got a special wig for you for the underwater sequences, as long as it's station players. That'll be fine. But yeah, I mean, I think it kind of comes together. And I also have to say, one of the things that I think helps your argument that you just made, Ian, is that Bond is in these places where there are crowds. There is a lot of activity around it. He's dodging through the dancers and the parade and different things like that. And yet he keeps it together. And that's also Connery navigating it, these crowd scenes, which are very well done. And I think he has a confidence as an actor to know how to kind of go through that. It really is an impressive film on a lot of, dare I say, grounded levels. You don't necessarily think of James Bond as kind of grounded material, but as Bond films go, this one has a certain amount of grounding to it that I think is very admirable.
Well, yeah, I mean the parade later in the film where he gets shot in the calf, and
Right.
there's like these trails of blood following him. So he thinks, oh, I can just escape into the crowd, but you've got like four Spectre agents, and then led by is it Fiona? Is that am I thinking of the
Yes,
right?
that is correct.
Right.
Yep,
Okay,
Fiona. Yep.
yeah, she's kind of like
Played by an
leading
actress
this.
named Luciana Paluzzi.
Yes, very, very impressive, by the
Very,
way.
very good performance.
As far as like, I think she's more impressive than our Largo, and far more surprising.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I think she's the better villain in it, just because she's got, I think, more screen time with Bond and interaction with him too.
but she's leading this team, and they're following the blood splatters. And even when Bond hides in the parade float, they're getting really close to him, and he kind of like
Yep.
backs his way out through the crowd, and you can tell that he's wounded. I mean,
Yeah, he's
he doesn't
limping
like a yeah, he doesn't
limping
make
through
a
that.
big show of it, but you're like, oh my gosh,
Yep.
forget about getting away from Spectre. He's now got a bullet in his calf. What is he gonna
Right.
do?
Right. Yeah, and I think those things give it that sense of realism, which even as far-fetched as some of this goes, I mean, even when he flies away with the jetpack, he puts on the helmet, and that would be realistic probably for that time. I'm sure that, and for what it's worth, it looks pretty real. I'm sure it's just being hung from a helicopter, but it's not fancy. He doesn't do anything sideways, and they don't have more than one or two rear screen projection shots. In fact, by and large, it's probably the stuntman out there. It's another reason they probably have the helmet on, so we really can't see that it's not Connery. But it's a quick throwaway but funny escape, and it's done well. And then he gets to the car and drives away. So even that has a certain amount of grounded. It's not like nothing against it. It's very funny and well done. But the For Your Eyes Only pre-credit sequence where Bond ostensibly grabs Blofeld in his wheelchair and takes him around London vis-a-vis the helicopter is so over the top that you can't help but just laugh at it. At one point, Blofeld trying to, well, he's supposed to be Blofeld, I think, because he's got the cat and he's bald and he's wearing the gray sort of, outfit. At one point, he goes, "Please, Mr. Bond, we can negotiate this. I'll buy you a delicatessen." I mean, they're just throwing goofy shit in there for the sake of, well, it's the 70s. Let's all make it funny. It's Mad Magazine time. But this one is treated like a serious Bond movie. In fact, I think it's one of the, with You Only Live Twice and Diamonds Are Forever, which were Connery's other two than this one, as well as Never Say Never. They were a little more arch and a little more wink wink in the sort of Roger Moore way that he kind of perfected during the 70s. I think on Her Majesty's Secret Service, the one with George Lazenby, is a very serious and very well done film as well, very grounded. And I think that stands out amongst sort of this set as one of those films too. But impressively, there's a lot in Thunderball that surprises with those kind of attributes.
Yeah, I actually George Lazenby is the one James Bond that I have ever met in real life.
Oh, interesting.
And I met him at Comic-Con like 20 years ago or something
Oh,
like
wow.
that,
Was
getting an
Pam
autograph for
Shriver
a
with
friend.
him?
Huh?
Was Pam Shriver with him? Do you remember that tennis player? And she
No.
was like a women's interviewer for CBS. I think it was CBS television tennis coverage for many, many years. I believe that she was married to George Lazenby for many, many years, maybe a couple decades.
I don't know. I was there basically getting an autograph for a friend, and then I got one for myself, obviously. And then
Yeah.
we took a picture, and that guy is tall, like
Oh, wow.
Conan O'Brien tall. It was weird, but he's
Oh,
very nice. Yeah.
interesting. I
Yeah.
think that's a very good movie. A very, I think it's climbing higher in the oeuvre of Bond, as well as Casino Royale. I mean, a lot of people really love Skyfall, and because Adele won the Oscar for that song and everything, and Javier Bardem was a very memorable villain in that, and Judi Dench's M, of course, dies in it. So there's a lot of things going for Skyfall, but Casino Royale to me, I think really is one of the top maybe 2 or 3 Bond films, because not only what it did to sort of reestablish it, make it important again, make it viable in the world of Bourne and John Wick, et cetera, and that kind of new modernity, but also because it was played so realistically. And you talked about the fight sequences before, when Bond and Vespa are fighting in that stairwell with one of the henchmen. And I mean, you feel every punch, you feel every hit, and he's bloodied and his suit is ruined, and there's none of that, Roger Moore cracking a joke without ever cracking a rib kind of glibness. And I think a lot of that is evidenced here, as some of the examples that you stated, like with him limping and having that blood and trying to hide that because it makes him vulnerable. That became a thing in Casino Royale, and I think it was one of the great attributes of it. I also think they did so well there with the villain, and making a card game, which is just people sitting across the table, so tense and wonderful and scary and exciting, and as well as some of the surprises that lay in store after the villain was dispatched. You have a whole nother 25 minutes of the film. It's like, what? This isn't the end? No, we're in Venice, baby. We're going to make some hay out of those sinking buildings. So
Right.
hang on.
It is great. I mean, it's a long movie, but I think I've
Yeah.
seen it like 10 times in the last
Yeah.
20 years, because I could go watch it again right now.
I'm with you. I love it.
But yeah, so as far as Thunderball goes, I mean, it's the whole thing about trying to retrieve the nuclear warheads before they can be used to blow up. It was either going to be a city in the UK or in America, and they decide that Spectre decides they're going to blow up Miami.
Right.
And so, but they have no idea where these bombs are. Eventually, Bond is able to triangulate them over the Golden Grotto, which is where the plane went down and has been kind of covered over with this, I guess, a radar blocking tarp or a net of some kind. And then a little bit further away is a cave where they've hidden these submersibles that they're going to load the bombs onto. And the end of the film is a spectacular, and if you haven't seen this movie, folks, you owe it to yourself to watch Thunderball, because I'll put this climactic scene up against just about any modern action scene that you can think of. It is the U.S. Coast Guard parachuting down from this large carrier plane up against an army of Spectre agents. Now, the Coast Guards all have red wetsuits, and the Spectre agents all have black wetsuits, so you can tell the good guys from the bad guys. It's all very convenient shorthand. But then you've also got Largo and James Bond thrown into the mix, and they're all underwater fighting each other. It's like the fight scenes from Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, except underwater, with people shooting spear guns and using wrecked ships and all sorts, cutting their oxygen lines. It's incredible, and you just wonder, how the hell did they pull this off before the era of CG and all sorts of other kind of special effects. The whole thing is a special effect. It's phenomenal.
It really is. And the fact that it was done in 65, when really there wasn't a lot of even color films being done then. I mean, there was still, up until, really the biggest films were in color generally, but mostly through the 40s and 50s, it was still black and white a lot, unless it were musicals and things that kind of screen for, Technicolor. But this was done, so it's lush and it's beautiful, and the locations and these vast Canadim production designed rooms and sets. And then for the climax, where it goes underwater and has this huge battle scene, not with 2 people, not with 5 people, with probably 20 people, and all kinds of, to your point, violence and actions, and just even the choreography. It's not like you can fake a punch or a slap and stuff like that. I mean, you're doing this underwater, so it's all in slow motion and it seems believable. Connery's there. Chelly is there, and he was, I think, in his 40s or late 40s when he did this movie. So, this is pretty impressive. Now you can say, well, it's probably done in a water tank, and maybe, they just had very good stuntmen who kind of looked like these guys. But hey, anytime you put your actors underwater and then act them to roll around and pretend they're getting hit or punched or whatever like that is a danger to not only the actor, but frankly to the whole darn production. I don't know when they did it, if it was at the end of the movie or the beginning, but it's so impressive. And you think back to 65 when this kind of stuff just wasn't done. There weren't a lot of big action sequences like this in any movies then. And Bond was doing that. I mean, Bond was really the first, and I think why it became such a phenomenon throughout the world over the years, and including this film being such a moneymaker, was that this was something that you couldn't and probably didn't see anywhere else.
Yeah, it's impressive watching it like on a big, TV and 4K and everything, but
Yeah.
it really made me want to. I don't know if there's plans because it's an anniversary or something, but it'd be great if this movie came back to theaters, because just the scene where you get it's just a masterclass in composition where you see the Coast Guard folks all dropped into the water at the same time, like kind
Yes.
of coming into formation, coming through the frame. It's just such a masterful composition in a tense moment. You're like, it's almost like the X-wings gearing up for that battle, the death against the Death Star, which
Right.
would be not for another 12 years later. So I know Lucas was influenced by aerial combat from movies in the 40s, but I wonder if there's a little Thunderball in there too.
I think any kind of big crowd-pleasing action epic has to pay an homage or acknowledgement to what Bond did to get us all there. The other thing too that's kind of impressive about this film, and again, some of it by modern audience standards, you would laugh at, like, oh, that's when the boat is careening around and it comes very close to hitting the rocks or driving ashore, and Connery
It's going like 6,000 miles an
yeah,
hour.
Shelley are trying to manage that steering wheel and stuff, and you can see that it's rear screen projection outside and stuff like that. But at the same time, what they're doing, which is really well done there, is they are having action scenes in this contained area where Bond is fighting with not only Largo, but a couple of his henchmen, and it's kind of done practically. Like he's throwing people around, they're crashing into stuff. He's using items that are there to try to thwart them, or kicking them, or tossing them out the door, or banging the door to the cabin on the one henchman's head. And I give them credit, even though it's a little bit silly, and some of the sped up film maybe sort of begs, sort of a suspension of disbelief. The actual action and fighting between them seems pretty gutsy and grounded in its own right. So it's a nice counter to it. And I love that they spent time making it look like it's a real battle, like it's a real fight. And it's not just fake punches and nobody's getting hurt and it's all dispatched in a couple of quick seconds. No, it goes on for a while. And so it adds the extra tension to it, because they also could be hitting the rocks at any moment and none of that will matter.
Well, also, we kind of talked about this before. Largo gets the jump on Bond, and he's got the gun trained on him. You're like,
Right.
how is Bond going to get out of this?
Yeah,
And
that's
he
right.
gets a spear gun in the back, and they don't set this up at all.
Not at all. You don't know it's coming.
Right, Domino is not in the scene whatsoever. She just kind of like appears out of the door, like, oh, that's where she was this whole time. And they also, that she kills the bad guy. It's not a matter of he gets the harpoon in the back, but then he kind of slinks off, and then he's going to get the jump on Bond again, and then Bond's going to shoot him. Like, he is sort of denied the death blow of the villain in this movie, which is, it's kind of cool and unexpected to see. Also, one thing I forgot to mention earlier on the actual warheads, I don't know if this is I assume it was a joke, and I'm not sure if everyone picked up on this, but there's like writing on the side of the bomb, as there usually is, but one of them says "handle like eggs." Did you see that?
Yes. Yes. I also love the thing at the end. It's like when the two arrows come together, and it's kind of like, well, you mean the girl and the guy, sort of, as they're swept away in this orgasmic sort of bursting out of the raft. I also think it's kind of funny how there's a certain amount of discipline in this movie that I dare say action adventure movies and even subsequent Bond movies down the road didn't have as quite of sort of the, like, we've done enough, we don't have to make more of this than they do. And that is at the very end, Domino is helped by the one physicist who's kind of a nerdy guy. I think his name was Ladislav Kutzy, and he's played by an actor, George Pravda. I wrote it down, and he helps sort of defy Largo and turn against him a little bit without hurting his own situation. But he helps save Domino, and that's allows her to kill Largo at the end. And Bond saves him too, and he hands him a life preserver, and the Kutzy says, "I can't swim," and he goes, "Well, it's a good time to learn," and he pushes him out there, and they never show him after that. I mean, any movie that would be done subsequently, especially in the Roger Moore era, you'd probably see some close-ups of him, and he'd be quibbling and huffing and puffing like, I think there's a crab in my pants or something like that, and they don't go there. They just, Bond is dignified enough and conscientious enough to save him. And then he's with the girl, and they get pulled off by the plane at the end. We don't have to revisit it. We don't have to make more of it. Not that they couldn't, and it might have been clever and witty, but I just love the discipline that, even when Largo's killed, it's not a prolonged death thing. He's like shocked and realizes it's her, and then he dies, and there's not a ton of close-ups or one last line that he says or whatever like that. I mean, the best part about it is Domino says, "I'm glad I killed him." And Connery as Bond cracks, "You are," or something like that. I forget exactly the line is, but it's like, "You and me both, baby,"
Right.
And it's very funny. And that's kind of it. That's kind of the main last dialogue in it. And it's a quick ending, and they have a little bit of a shticky thing with them pulled up by the plane. But it's not belabored, and it's just, again, sort of grounded and smart and tight. And I really appreciate that, as well as all of the other attributes we've talked about. I also want to say one thing too, because I'm also a big Tom Jones fan, but it's very rare that a man sings a James Bond theme. In fact, it's almost become a cliche that it's sort of like a Bond lover singing about how great he is, nobody does it better, or the world is not enough, and I want you, but I can't let the world have you, kind of stuff. But Tom Jones sings it, and he sings a very good song about James Bond too. Also, there was a male singing the song in Casino Royale about my name, kind of from
Chris
the point
Cornell.
of view. That's right, from the point of Bond, which is very rare.
And I got to say, that is one of the things that I love so much about. I love that song, and I love that animated opening, because
Very well done.
It's a wonderful thesis statement about the kind of the what does it take to become an agent, and do you really want to do that?
Right.
I know Sam Smith sang one of the other Craig Bonds, but Tom Jones.
And
it's a fun theme.
It is. And I mean, it's so funny too, because it literally is telling us, after now the fourth film, of a little bit shorthand of, maybe why Bond is as kind of brutal as he is. And some people at the time were criticizing him as, I mean, hard to believe, but in the 60s, Bond was considered a little sexist and a little old school, and, kind of pushing and slapping even some of the bad female characters around in it. But, Tom Jones sings, his needs are more, so he gives less. And like, hey, this man is a spy. He's trying to save the world. He's after these nukes. Cut him a little slack if he's a little brusque, But when he strikes with this boom. I mean, it almost could have been a cannonball, but, it's Thunderball. And it's just this, he's got to do the job. And you don't get a second shot on some of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, especially when you talk about like the female villains, and him kind of being rough with them. It's like, well, I mean, what do you want? I mean,
they're villains. In fact, if anything, he's an equal opportunity, agent, because he's pushing around the bad guys and the bad girls.
Right. It's that fine line of hypocrisy. Like, you don't want to, hit a woman, which, you don't want to do. But on the other hand, if you're trying to paint her as like empowered enough to be like the second in command, or I guess the third in command, or however that works with the SPECTRE organization, like, but you also don't want her to be able to get as well as she gives. It's like,
that's right.
She's the wilting flower, but she's also the evil, like, mastermind or hench person. You can't have it both ways.
And they've always been a little conscientious about that too. Like Rosa Klebb goes after Bond at the end of From Russia with Love, but it's the Bond girl who shoots her, not Sean Connery. So they just a little conscientious of that, or even going to the one with Rosamund Pike where she's fighting with Halle Berry up in the plane, so he doesn't have to dispatch of her. We can give, you know, the woman the job of making sure that the woman is done in, so it doesn't necessarily get even closer to somebody screaming about misogyny or something.
But it's weird because you never hear the misandry argument when these women are killing guys left and right,
That's
right?
true. It's
You
true.
know,
That's
um,
true.
but I will say, I mean, that's what's kind of impressive. One of the many things that's impressive about Thunderball is the female characters in this movie. It's strange because Paula, who is the kind of the agent who's helping
Right.
Bond out, who ends up dying kind of on accident,
Yeah.
she, I swear to God, I thought that was Sarah Douglas.
She looks very
She,
much like her. In fact,
yeah,
there's a similar look to them, definitely. In fact, there's a couple of strong women here. I mean, there's three actually pretty prominent females, and also Felix Leiter or Leader has more to do in this film than almost any other Bond, except maybe Casino Royale, where Jeffrey Wright is a fairly strong presence in that, which is another attribute of that's good about that movie. Which I love. One other thing I just want to highlight here, and that is that's such a Bond thing too, but it was really firing on all cylinders here, is the John Barry score. The music is so key here, and even though it's kind of a bombastic song, the way that theme is used throughout the movie is much more languid and kind of mysterious, and even he incorporates that sort of secondary Bond theme, which is kind of almost comically actiony, with that, bum, 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 but it's like funny with, him, because it's kind of fun with him being chased by not one, not two, but four henchmen what's her name? The one we were just talking about, Fiona, amongst all these people who are dancing and partying and everything else. And so it just gives it a little bit of energy too. But there's a sense of the mystery in John Barry's work. And I think in most of his themes, there's a slight haunting quality, which I think fits in with, like, this is a tough trade, even though it's played for fun and everything else. But the spy game during the Cold War was a lot of times life and death, and the threat of nukes and the threat of Russia and all that kind of stuff couldn't be minimalized. And these films wisely, as does John Barry's score, kind of underline that.
well, I think with Thunderball especially, it's not camp.
Right.
It's fun, but there are some of the action sequences are downright tense and a bit
Yes.
scary. There's a
Yep.
bit where Bond is going, he goes underwater to the yacht, essentially Largo's
Mhm.
yacht, to take
Mhm.
some pictures to send back to base or whatever. And the people figure out that he's down there because they have these TV monitors all over the boat. It's a very modern kind of conceit. We don't really think about it now, but you're thinking about
Right.
1965. So they decide, okay, Vargas, I think, is one of the Largo's henchmen.
Right.
He goes out with a bunch of hand grenades and just starts pitching them into the water,
Yep.
and they fall and they blow up, and you see Bond in pain because
Yes.
of the sound reverberations. He's
Yep.
like holding his head,
Yep.
not only the concussive blast, but it's like he's going to go deaf, and he's in genuine peril. And he finally outwits them by like ditching his tank and everything, and having it kind of float away to the point where they like, oh, we must have gotten him. But
Mhm.
it's it's a fun scene in that it's kind of inventive, but you're also kind of on the edge of your seat, like, really, how is he going to get out of this one?
Right. Well, and the interesting thing about all the underwater stuff here, and they certainly make a great deal of hay of it, is how many ways can you die underwater? A lot of ways. I mean, obviously drowning, but then you can have your eardrums burst, or you're knocked unconscious by the sound waves. You can be shot with a spear. You can be cut. You can have your oxygen hose eradicated. There's one point in the final battle where a couple of bad guys are defeated by this big sort of wreckage falling on them, and it falls very slow, but it's still probably 2 tons, and it's like, man, that's a lot of danger down there. So let's treat it with a little respect.
Oh yeah, the introduction of the Domino character is Bond is kind of following her as she's just kind of like diving underwater, like collecting a starfish, and she gets her leg caught in a
Yep,
rock, and he kind of helps her out. But if he hadn't been there, she probably would not have left
exactly.
that spot.
That's right.
Um,
And Shelley
that
Winters thinks she had it bad in the Poseidon Adventure. All she had to do is swim, navigate a couple of floors, and save Gene Hackman's Reverend Scott from some piece of something that had fallen on him. Here, Bond is doing 5 times that work.
the audacity.
How dare
Um,
she? Of
but
course, she wasn't
no,
trained the Bond stuff. But anyway.
but there was one scene or one moment during that climactic battle between the Coast Guard and the Spectre agents. I think Bond delivered this killing blow, but he takes one of those tri-point spears and just like shoves it through the goggles of the one guy, and it just like you see it go not like into his eye, but you can tell it went through
Yeah,
his eye
yeah,
and
yeah.
probably through his brain. It's rough. There's people getting speared. I mean, it's like out of a John Wayne Western, except it's underwater, and it's no less horrific because people are getting it in like the neck and the chest, and it's shockingly violent for a movie that I think probably has a reputation of like, oh, it's a '60s Bond. It's all like kind of fun and kitschy.
Right.
It's not.
Right. In fact, I think those early Bond movies, uh, death and violence had a little more heft to them. I mean, sure, Goldfinger gets sucked out of the window in the plane at the end, and there's a couple of other sort of humorous things. I mean, Rosa Klebb with the knife coming out of her shoe at the end trying to kill Bond, but still, it's a poison knife or whatever. But when people are shot or they're hurt or they're finally done in, it has a little more oomph, where it's not just waiting for James Bond to go like, he always did have an inflated opinion of himself, which is what he says after Mr. Big is killed in Live and Let Die, which I really like as a James Bond movie on many levels for sure. But that kind of stuff just underlines it as silliness, and grant you he blew up, which is probably a little silly to begin with. But I think whenever the Bond films, whether it was sort of the spy who, or not the spy, For Your Eyes Only, which was a little bit of Roger Moore, sort of one more serious Bond, where there's a little more gravitas to everything, or the Daniel Craig movies, particularly Casino Royale, when he earns that final kill to get his the second final kill to get his 007 thing, after we see him getting his final kill by taking out the guy who's been betraying MI6. It's a brutal scene. In fact, you wonder, in Mission Impossible Fallout, which is one of my favorite of the Mission Impossible films, they had that big bathroom scene. It's like, I wonder where they got some of that from, because Daniel Craig already did that a few years earlier at Casino Royale, and that was the first big one of the first big set pieces in that film.
Yeah, I think that was one of the issues I had with Fallout is like, yeah, I just saw this.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but yeah. Well, any final thoughts on Thunderball?
I think it reminded me of, dare I say, the difficulty and kind of the crucial decision that is going to come now with Amazon and the powers that be picking the new James Bond. Because I think, if anything, this kind of film, I think, is pointing them towards the direction of making it more grounded, probably more believable, a little bit more small. It's not always taking over the world. It's using this for extortion or some of those kind of early motives of Spectre in the books. And if I was doing it again, I don't think anybody's listening to me from Amazon, but if they are listening to the show, as they all should, I think it would be smart to go back to the Cold War, go back to the books, start it over in the 50s, keep it more grounded. You don't have all the gadgets, you don't have the modern cell phones and lasers and tracking systems, and let Bond be a real Cold Warrior who has to be a spy, and there's really big stakes that are recognizable and were a big deal in the world and matter to both Britain, America, and the Allies.
And, I agree, but I'm also of the camp, along with pretty much any IP now, is just stop making them. Never going to happen because Amazon spent
Yeah,
all this money to
yes,
acquire the
yeah.
library, but it's like we have
We have so many
several,
of these Bond movies already. Do we need more? That is the answer to that is, of course, yes, because there's money to be made. But you're right. I mean, they've done probably plenty that
Well, but I think that the issue for me is that there are so many people that have taken up the Bond mantle and made other franchises out of them, whether it be the Bourne movies, the Mission Impossible movies, that it's just, James Bond is a brand, but it's also kind of like every other movie. I don't know what you do unless you get some kind of visionary to take it back to the kind of the roots, like you're saying with the Cold War, but give us kind of an experience that we can't get from just going back and watching the James Bond movies. Because I
Right.
don't know if I think the best example is kind of like X-Men First Class, where they set that
Mhm.
back in the 1960s
Right.
and they really made it feel like a period piece without leaning
Yes.
into the kitsch of it.
Yep.
They made a serious but fun adventure comic book movie. I don't know if you can do that with James Bond, because I feel like you'd have to find someone who could do a period piece that would also take it seriously and not give in to the temptation, probably from the studio, to say, "Oh, it's in the '60s, so we got to make it more like Austin Powers than a Cold War thriller like the original, Connery Bonds."
Right. I mean, I think it would be a real good challenge for not only Amazon to reconsider how to truly reboot this, especially now that they're taking a few years to figure it out. But dare I say, I think respecting Ian Fleming, if you go back to, say, for example, The Man with the Golden Gun, now I think that is a kitschy Bond film and very amusing and well done, and on a number of really underrated levels. I think Christopher Lee, for example, is a terrific villain in that. But the original book is about Bond stopping an assassin who's kind of, if you will, similar to him in that they're both, have this sort of hired or licensed to kill kind of theme to it. That could make for a very tight, small, regular sort of hunt, almost like The Third Man, where you're looking for Harry Lime, or where you're trying to figure out this one sort of modest mystery. I don't know if audiences would accept that. I don't know, after all of the Bond tropes and shtick that we've come to expect and has been satirized as well, if that could play on a smaller level, but maybe it could be. I mean, I think a lot of the audiences today don't know Bond, whether it's Connery or Roger Moore or Timothy Dalton for that matter. Maybe they know some of the Pierce Brosnan stuff, but if they only know the Daniel Craig things, I think going back to the Cold War and making Russia a villain again, which seems relevant and could play today, even if it's a period piece, might be the best route to go if you're going to do more of these. And I'm sure they are. I would rather see that than, them try to contemporize Bond in some, box checking kind of way that they think makes it for this millennium and this decade. But I think the better thing would be go back to the original books, which made him a phenomenon worldwide, and they really haven't exploited as the stories.
The one thing that I think they can do, and I hate to put this out there, but I mean, other people have talked about it, is because it's Amazon now, they've talked about, maybe we'll do a Miss Moneypenny TV series,
Mhm.
or, we can have movies and then also, kind of like the Disney Plus thing with Marvel. We'll have
Yep.
movies every couple of years, but we'll have like shows that kind of like lead into them. I
Mhm.
think there might be the room to play around there where you could have a TV series based on The Man with the Golden Gun,
Mhm.
or a movie or something that doesn't necessarily, you can have that small personal Bond story, because if
Mhm.
that's the only thing, I don't think audiences are going to show up. I don't think Amazon's going to be like, we paid $100 million for this license or whatever it was. We have to have the big explosion and stuff because we
Mhm.
can't put, the most intimate Bond, the most personal Bond yet. Like, well, that's great, but
Well, to your
where's
very
the
point,
3 hour explosion epic?
it's a great point, Ian, because I think the trend right now, and dare I say, the better stuff that I think is really getting audiences to look at sort of screen entertainment a little bit new, and maybe a better forum for it are the miniseries. You have more time to tell story. You have more time to develop characters. It doesn't have to be wrapped up in 2 hours. That's the one problem if you're going to do a big screen Bond. As much as you think, well, it's got to be on the big screen, but arguably, as the longest a Bond movie is going to be is 2.5 hours, and there's not a lot of time to tell a story there, which is actually a reason to go back to the smaller books. Those books lend themselves to the shorter stories lend themselves to a 2.5 hour movie. But I think you might actually be onto something. I mean, if Amazon is really looking at it, do they treat it like it's Reacher? And Reacher is taking these books that are very popular and they're doing one of them each season, but there are 6 to 8 episodes. And so far, after 3 seasons, it's worked brilliantly for them. In fact, they can't make them fast enough, though they just wrapped on the 4th season. So that'll be coming sometime probably later, or probably around Christmas, I would guess, which is a great gift for all the fans of it. But they've done that very well. And Reacher is kind of a version of James Bond, as you said, Bourne, and all those other things are. So, I mean, if they really wanted to change the game, they'd say, we're going to do Bond, and it's going to be a series, and we're going to do it for 6 episodes, 6 hours or whatever. I think that might be a way to appeal to audiences that are more and more getting used to the Netflixes and the Apples, where, you know, the longer term narrative is really playing well, doing much better for, I mean, look at all the stuff they, you know, just, you know, as they're doing Emmy talk, I mean, all these Black Doves and the spy shows that are doing very well, and all that kind of stuff. And they're bringing them back. They couldn't make Black Doves fast enough. In fact, right after that premiered, they did a special sort of preview ad, if you will, with Ben Whishaw and Keira Knightley congratulating themselves in a pub, about how successful Black Doves was. And Ben says, well, don't get too you know, happy over Christmas, because we're coming back in the 2nd week of January and starting the new season. And he was like, really, we are. And it's like, yeah, they want to let you know that they're not going to take 2 years to make the 2nd series. So I think you actually are onto something that I hadn't thought about before, but it seems perfectly right. Make it into the next Reacher. That might be the way to go.
I love the idea of tackling one book, you know, every year. Like, start off with Dr. No, and just remake the entire Bond film
Do the
series,
real book
but as a movie miniseries, and stay faithful to the adaptation. You know, with maybe, I mean, you could even maybe contemporize them if you want to, you know, set them in 2025, but follow the spirit of the book, or just, you know, do a period piece.
You know what, Ian, I'm going to say one last thing, and this is my final thing, because I know we're getting a little bit long. Pardon me for that, but I will say one thing. I think you might have actually just hit the nail on the head. That might be why Amazon bought it. Because I think after the success of Reacher and some of these longer term things, you know, they've done some Lord of the Rings and some things like that, the Wheel of Time or whatever, that have done very well, and you know, been able to do a couple seasons of them. They may be looking at these books and thinking, you know what, rather than try to get all this condensed in 2.5 hours, and, you know, some of it's been done before, I wouldn't be surprised if they said, we're going to do Bond as at least both miniseries and movie. If there's a special movie, maybe, but if I were them, that might be the reason they bought it, because they see it as this kind of programming is the new way to go. And they could do that with these books and give them 6 good hours and reinvent the story, because nobody knows the real books and story, and get them to watch for a month or 2.
Yeah. I mean, if they really wanted to go all out, they could do, I'm not necessarily proposing this, 'cause I'm not sure how it would work, but you've got different Bonds throughout the years, you know, Connery, Craig, Moore, as we've discussed. What if they were to launch this and they did like a different Bond, a different actor playing James Bond for the different eras? Like, if you start off with Dr. No, and then you jump to, like, okay, the next season, we're not going to follow the book chronologically. We're going to do The Living Daylights. So it's going to be set in the 1980s. We're going to have a different actor playing Bond, because
that's interesting too. Doctor Who it, if you will, you know, give it a
regenerate Bond. Yeah.
Again, I mean, I think to truly keep things fresh, and these audiences who are so short memory and in some respects attention deficit, keeping that kind of freshness to it, as opposed to, well, we're going to put it all on one actor for a decade. Well, maybe that's how it used to be for the first 50 years, but I don't think that's where it's at anymore. At least it doesn't have to be that, especially when you have what you said, the ability to do different things. And I think that's a great thought. I also think there's something to be said about, like, what if you do an original Bond story? Maybe it isn't the major movie thing if you go that route, but it's part of the Amazon series, where you bring back an old Bond. I mean, I've always thought, when they had Judi Dench be M for both Pierce Brosnan and Daniel Craig, I thought she's in the role of M. And of course, Ray Fiennes comes in and he's M, as just as Bernard Lee was. So she's maybe with a different Bond, but it's like, does that make sense in the through line? Well, it would, if that's also his identity as well as 007. That's not who he really was. He is named James Bond 007 because that's his cover. And that would explain why Judi Dench could be M to 2 different Bonds. And then bring back an old Bond. You know, Pierce Brosnan looks amazing. Have him do an adventure where he's the old Bond working with a new Bond. That could be really interesting.
Or, you know, you do the Goldfinger thing, or Golden Eye, sorry, where he is the the double O agent who goes bad.
Just like Jim Phelps in the first Mission Impossible. I still haven't forgiven him for that. How dare they do that to poor Peter Graves' character? What? How dare you?
He's probably spinning in his graves.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, very well
Yeah.
done. I didn't even see that coming. It's
Had
like
to do it.
it's like the harpoon in Lager's back. He caught me off guard. I'm glad I killed him. You're telling me.
All right. Well, Jeff, thank you for hanging out and talking Thunderball. I feel like we're going to have another James Bond conversation in us at some point, because I do need to see Dr. No.
Sure.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun, and
So fun.
It's nice talking about it with someone who's deep into the lore and the history of it too. Because I'm just, you know, kind of a casual, as it were. But I'm really digging this series, so we'll see where it goes.
Me too. Happy to be here and honored as well.
All right. Well, Jeff York of the Establishing Shot and Pipeline Artist, thank you so much. Again, folks, check out Jeff's information. It'll be down below. Also, if you like this show, please like and subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. Yeah, thanks a lot. Until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thank you very much, and take care. Hey everyone, Ian here. I know, long time no see. But if you like the video you just watched, feel free to subscribe to Kicking the Seat right here, and also check out the playlist and recommended video right here. Thanks for watching.